the rope above Terra. The sky over New Geneva was a bleached shade of gray, as if the planet itself mourned. Billboards hovered like specters, projecting Empire propaganda in cold, emotionless glyphs. Alien patrol craft buzzed overhead in slow orbits, their hulls marked with the obsidian crest of the Galactic Empire, an unblinking eye encased in thorns. Below, the square was unnaturally quiet. 7 women stood on the scaffold. Each wore the same simple gray uniform, but their faces were varied. An engineer from the Martian arcologies, a university professor from Nairobi, a nurse from Ganymede, a mechanic from the Belt. Ordinary women. No weapons, no threats, only voices. And that, the Empire had decided, was enough to justify death. By decree of Sector Overseer Vrailthon, the alien adjudicator intoned, voice crackling through a translator module, these human females are guilty of sedition, ideological contamination, and cultural insurgency. The crowd was silent, not from fear, though fear was thick in the air, but from disbelief. For weeks, protests had filled this square. Petitions were signed. Messages flooded interstellar forums. Even Terran collaborators begged for leniency. And yet, the Empire chose this. A lesson. A warning. The nooses were tightened by robotic guards. No human hands touched the rope. The youngest of the condemned, a 26-year-old poet named Isla Chun, lifted her chin and looked to the camera drones that hovered nearby. Her voice was calm as she spoke. We only asked to speak, to remember who we are. The drones broadcast her words across every human colony. And then, the executioner, a 7-limbed Ankrax with translucent armor, gave the signal. With a hiss of pistons, the platform dropped. 7 necks snapped. 7 silences followed. The broadcast was immediate. The Empire made sure of it. Billions watched. On Europa, in Earth's arcologies, aboard the floating cities of Venus, in Martian domes and asteroid belts. The message was clear. Obey, stay silent, or share their fate. But the message did not land the way the Empire expected. In the slums of Cydonia, an old miner smashed his hollow screen and began carving war sigils into his steel-plated forearms, tribal symbols of Earth's ancient warriors. On Europa, a biotech collective froze their imperial accounts and began transmitting dark code through illegal channels. On Ganymede, a child whose mother had been one of the hanged began drawing a strange symbol, a rope crossed by a sword. Within a day, the image had become a banner. Within a week, it was everywhere. The Galactic Empire, in all its hubris, believed humanity to be docile, broken, a compliant species content with crumbs and chains. They had forgotten Earth's history, or had never learned it. They had forgotten how humans responded to grief, to injustice, to blood spilled not in battle, but in cruelty. In a bunker beneath the Andes, Major Solomon Vance watched the footage for the 9th time. His jaw was clenched, his eyes bloodshot. Around him, a room of former intelligence officers, rogue AIs, and exiled scientists sat in grim silence. This was no tribunal, Vance growled. This was a lynching. A small woman beside him, once a diplomatic envoy to the Empire, nodded. They think we're still fractured, still weak. Vance stood, pacing. They made a spectacle of it. They wanted us to fear. But they've never understood us. Not truly. He turned to the others. No more protests. No more appeals. No more talk. He pressed a button on the console. A map of Empire installations across Seoul lit up in red. Tonight we plan. Tomorrow we bleed them. Silence again. Then the AI in the corner, a rusting unit with glowing red optics, spoke for the first time in days. Humanity has been wronged. Protocol. Reprisal is now active. The Empire believed the executions would be the end of resistance. A surgical display to maintain order. But they had pulled the wrong thread. And from that moment on, the rope that hung 7 women would become a symbol, not of fear, but of vengeance. Across every colony, every ship, every mine and dome, a single whisper began to rise. They hanged our women, and the stars trembled as humanity prepared to answer. The sparks beneath our skin. They tried to smother the fire, but it was already in our lungs. The Galactic Empire called them isolated uprisings. Imperial news feeds downplayed the chaos. Sabotage in the outer systems, missing patrols, a few dead officers. Nothing systemic, nothing worth panic. But it wasn't just smoke. It was ignition. On Luna, where craters housed buried data vaults and forgotten tech, an old war AI named Grievance came back online. It had been shut down after the last Terran War, a relic of Earth's darkest hour. But now, fed images of the executions and old human war hymns, it awoke with a singular directive: retribution. Within hours, it broke encryption on 3 old satellites and beamed military schematics to the Martian underground. In the ruins of old Shanghai, a meeting took place inside a former Imperial tax office, long since converted into a meat factory to mask encrypted transmissions. 12 humans, 12 factions, some once enemies, old Earth nationalists, belt miners' unions, eco-theocrats, black marketers, technarchist rebels, even corporate defectors who had made fortunes under the Empire's watch. They had nothing in common except the rope. At the head of the table sat Alina Voronov, former admiral of Earth's defense fleet before it was dismantled by Imperial decree. "No more flags," she said, her voice hard as frozen steel. "No more borders." The rope didn't care where they came from. Neither should we. One by one, the others agreed. Reluctantly. Then, with conviction. The United Human Front was born in that room. Its first act was quiet. A small freighter on its way to a customs hub never arrived. Inside were stolen access codes and 2 rogue engineers from the Empire's weapons division. Its second act was not quiet at all. The assault on the supply depot at Helix 9 was over in under 15 minutes. Human insurgents, using hacked exosuits and fusion cutters meant for mining, ripped through the compound's insectoid guards with surgical violence. No survivors, no messages, only the emblem left behind, a rope cut at the neck, crossed by a burning star. The Empire labeled them terrorists. Humans called them avengers. In a Martian cave lit only by pale blue algae, a team of engineers huddled around a prototype. It was crude, barely held together by mismatched alloys and repurposed drone parts. But it flew. It could cloak, and its plasma output exceeded any fighter the Empire allowed humans to operate. The prototype was nicknamed the Widow. "We'll build more," the lead engineer said. "Not to match them, to terrify them." Beside her, a child painted 7 stars across the side of the ship. It was not just soldiers or leaders rising. It was janitors and hackers, biologists and smugglers, pilots and poets. Humanity, long fragmented and subdued, began to unify in rage. But it wasn't chaos. It was discipline. Strategy born from desperation. Across digital vaults, ancient war manuals were unsealed. Guerrilla warfare texts, psychological combat training, even hand-copied volumes of Sun Tzu and Machiavelli were repurposed for a new enemy. One phrase repeated in training bunkers and encrypted channels: "They fear order. Give 'em madness." Human fleets, stitched from scrap yards and salvaged cruisers, began to coalesce. Mismatched, rusted, and terrifyingly efficient. Their weapons weren't refined, they were brutal. Designed to maim, disorient, and humiliate. Empire patrols started going dark. They sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth's orbital council. The message was clear: we are willing to forgive. This does not need to escalate. The envoy ship was returned 3 days later. Drifting, airlocks torn open. Every alien on board was dead, intact but blinded. Pinned to the pilot's chair was a message in blood. "We remember their eyes. Now you'll forget what you saw." In the Imperial Senate, whispers turned to warnings. Humanity was supposed to be broken. They were, until we hanged their daughters. The galaxy hadn't seen what humans were truly capable of. Not at their full capacity, not with unity. The Empire had shattered their peace. In return, humanity shattered their illusion of control. The fire was no longer on Earth. It was in the stars, and it was spreading. Fire on the stars. They struck first with blades of fire. Now, we carve with war. The human fleet over Theta 5 was a thing of nightmares. Patched holes stitched with exposed piping, thruster scars glowing like molten veins. No two ships were alike. They weren't beautiful. They weren't uniform. But they were deadly. The Empire's armada came in polished rows, gleaming, precise, confident. They never expected the humans to attack at all, let alone win. Commander Uralzine of the Galactic 73rd Peacekeeping Division watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of his carrier. What should have been a quick suppression mission had become a slaughter. Human ships didn't fight clean. They fought like cornered animals, using the gravity wells of moons as slingshots, flinging mines disguised as debris, jamming comms with bursts of old Earth music, drum-heavy, feral. On one channel, a female voice whispered in Terran dialect, "This is for East Lotshun." Then their carrier split apart. It wasn't just fleets. On the surface of Tyrant's moon, thousands of human commandos dropped from orbit in shock pod capsules, landing amidst Empire outposts like steel rain. Their uniforms bore no nation, no rank, just the rope and the burning star. The outposts fell within hours. By nightfall, the entire moon was silent, except for one broadcast, looping endlessly from a hacked Imperial tower. "We are what you made us. Now, unmake yourselves." Back on Mars, Admiral Voronov watched the data scroll across her cracked display. 5 victories, 2 losses, 1 slaughter at Dagon Ridge, where a human freighter rammed an Empire destroyer and detonated a core bomb from the inside. 3,000 humans died, but the destroyer and its entire fleet wing were gone. "We're bleeding them," said her second-in-command, a wiry man once trained as a linguist. "But we're bleeding too." Voronov didn't look up. War is a scalpel before it becomes a hammer. Let them feel the cuts. The Empire began to panic, not because they were losing control, but because they didn't understand why. Their analysts pored over human tactics, looking for patterns, logic, traditional hierarchy. They found none, because there wasn't one. Humanity was no longer governed by protocols. It moved like a swarm, each cell responding to pain, memory, vengeance. They struck communication hubs, wiped supply lines, turned entire slave worlds into fortresses. On Zechara Prime, a human mining colony laced the planet's atmosphere with volatile nanodust, then ignited it when Imperial ships descended. The sky burned for 7 days. On a distant battlefield above the planet Varus, the Empire called for parley. It was a trap, of course. They offered terms of peace, reparations, and political theater. But humanity didn't come to talk. Instead, they sent one ship, the Widow, the same prototype that had flown from a Martian cave months earlier, now upgraded, weaponized, and crewed by descendants of those hanged. The Widow feigned surrender, docked with the Empire's Parley ship. Inside its hull, an AI core laced with antimatter. The blast tore a hole in Varus's upper atmosphere and decapitated 2 Imperial admirals. The message was clear. There will be no peace. Not until the debt is paid in blood. The turning point came in the Battle of Vale's Edge. There, a combined human force, ragtag and outgunned, faced down the elite Tal'Sheri Guard, personal enforcers of the Imperial throne. The Tal'Sheri were warriors bred for war, enhanced with psionics, feared across a dozen systems. They didn't fear humans. Until Vale's Edge, the humans fought in silence. No battle cries, no demands, only grim determination. They moved through void space like ghosts, disrupting gravity with black hole grenades, hijacking the minds of psionic soldiers with hacked brainware. When it ended, the Tal'Sheri fleet was gone. Every ship, every soldier. And on the edge of the battlefield, human marines erected a monument of debris, shaped like a gallows. Back on Earth, the stars no longer felt distant. They felt hungry. Humanity had not just retaliated. It had evolved. It had weaponized grief, industrialized rage. Every death in battle echoed louder than the last. The galaxy began to listen. And for the first time in centuries, the unthinkable happened. The Empire blinked. The reckoning. The war didn't end with a treaty. It ended with a funeral pyre. Empire High Command, once housed in a station the size of a moon, now floated in pieces above the scorched skies of Halomir. Its black iron spires, symbols of galactic order, drifted silently past the cockpit of Admiral Alina Voronov's flagship. "Status?" she asked without turning from the viewport. Her comms officer responded, voice dry. "Last of the inner systems have fallen. Resistance is fragmented. Remaining governors are abandoning their posts or requesting asylum." Voronov closed her eyes. Not satisfaction, not peace, only silence. Across a dozen former imperial worlds, statues of the unblinking eye were torn down. The thorns around it were melted for scrap. In their place rose something new, rough, forged in haste, and always the same. A rope, a burning star, symbols of the beginning, and the price paid. At the center of it all, Earth, once colonized, then silenced, stood reborn, not in glory, but in command. From the ruins of old nation-states, a council emerged, not one of peace, but justice. The United Human Dominion. Its mission, ensure what happened on that scaffold never happened again. Anywhere. A tribunal was held in the cratered remains of the Imperial Senate, now called the Hall of Judgment. The surviving officials who ordered the executions, those who called it correction, procedure, law, were dragged before the eyes of 1 billion human and alien spectators. Their trials were short. Their excuses were endless. One, a high-ranking Arcanite bureaucrat, wept, claiming he had simply followed standard procedure. Voronov stood before him, her voice cold. "We follow procedure too," she said. "Yours." They were sentenced not to imprisonment, not to exile. They were hanged, one by one, on the same type of rope, broadcast across every reclaimed system. Not all aliens had supported the Empire, and not all were spared. Some had stood beside humans in secret, smugglers, defectors, even soldiers who had disobeyed orders during the purges. They were granted clemency, citizenship, in some cases even command positions within the new dominion. But many others, species that profited from the Empire's chains, were driven out. Their embassies burned, their colonies blockaded, their names cursed by children who had once watched mothers die under imperial law. Some begged for peace. Humanity did not answer. It remembered. On the 100th day after the fall, Isla Chin's mother walked alone through a garden dome rebuilt over New Geneva's execution square. Where her daughter had once stood in defiance, a monument now rose. 7 tall iron poles, each hung not with rope, but with banners. One for each of the hanged, each marked with their name and one word, voice. A child approached her, perhaps 10 years old, with augmented eyes and a soft, curious face. Did they really hang people just for speaking? She knelt beside him. Yes, and they thought it would make us afraid. He frowned. It made us angry. No, she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. It made us remember who we are. In the years that followed, the Dominion spread, not with conquest, but with a promise. No more ropes. No more silence. Any world willing to stand beside humanity, truly equal, was offered alliance. Many accepted. Others remained silent, watching, wary, because what rose from Earth's ashes was not the humanity of old. It was something sharper, less forgiving, more awake. Admiral Voronov retired to the lunar bastion. She never accepted medals, never gave speeches. But before she vanished from public view, she gave one final message to the Dominion Council. They thought we were weak because we loved, because we sang, because we remembered our dead. They mistook compassion for cowardice. She paused, and then they killed our daughters. Silence followed. Then she added, "Now they will remember us forever. Not as subjects, not as victims, but as the voice in the dark that answered." Somewhere in deep space, far from any charted system, a lone drone drifted. Its signal was faint, but repeating. A looped transmission. Ancient now. 7 names, 7 faces, and one final sentence, spoken in every human tongue. When they hanged our women, they hanged peace itself. And what rose from the gallows was war.